This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
Thank you for joining us today. With me is John Cameron in the middle, Richard Fields down on the other end. And gentlemen, something that actually talks to me in my own neighborhood, the gunshot sensors are a big issue here in Sacramento. And they've actually added more. There was a scant, actually, protest about this shot spotter, the gunshot shot spotter, being used in Sacramento, despite the fact that in Chicago, the Chicago Watchdog has found that they're ineffective at best, and at worst, they actually lead to discriminatory police practices. Do you guys have any thoughts? John, how about start with you?
Well, I first of all, being the hardcore Second Amendment a proponent that I am, I think it doesn't matter if shots are fired. The only time we're concerned about shots being fired, if you believe in the right to keep and bear arms, is if somebody's shot. So, the idea that somebody's target practice, or since the algorithms are so poorly done, somebody fires off a loud firework or any number of noises are misinterpreted as gunshots, and then they go through a human being to check it and judge it, and somehow this is way more efficient than somebody calling 911. I think, as a citizen, I would much rather that another citizen called 911 to report a crime than relying on something that interprets noise as a reason to scramble the heavily armed, trigger-happy police to a neighborhood, especially when everything I've read says that the neighborhoods that get scrambled to most often are the ones that are least trustful of the police. So I have a problem with it. Even if the technology worked perfectly, I don't really care if somebody's firing. I mean, it wakes me up. I'll go talk to my neighbor and say, "Quit doing target practice at 1 o'clock in the morning, please." But if a fellow citizen observes a crime or suspects a crime and calls him out, I'm okay with that. But I'm not okay with some sensor hanging from some kind of tree somewhere directing the cops to my neighborhood.
I don't know if it's been tested in court or if there's even anybody has thought of testing it in court, but it seems to me like there would be a Fourth Amendment issue and not unlawful search and seizure. Just saying, the fact of a gunshot is not, as you pointed out, a crime in and of itself, and simply saying that because a gun has been fired, a shot has been heard, that's a reason to go investigating. Seems to be weak on search and seizure grounds.
Well, and I didn't think about the Fourth Amendment, but unreasonable search and seizure. But I think if I were to check the myriad of rules, regulations, and laws in Sacramento, where I live in Sacramento, California, that firing off a gun in city limits other than an appropriate range or something under very, very limited circumstances probably is a crime. But I'm saying, A, it shouldn't be, and B, I agree with you, Richard, that it is unlawful search and seizure. And C, who cares? Unless the crime's being committed. And, relying on algorithm-driven technology, we've had many discussions on the shows about, whoever writes the algorithm sways action and activity. We've talked numerous times about how major search engines don't allow you to get to where you want to go. They send you to where they want you to go, and that's algorithm based. And I wouldn't put it past the people writing the algorithms for this shot, whatever it's called, program, shot starter, shot fire,
shot spotter, shot
spotter, to have monkeyed with those algorithms. So it's a mess, and I don't like it. It's just further encroachment on our freedoms, our freedom from being watched by the overlords, and I'd like to see a nice Fourth Amendment claim against that. So
Well, it is an open microphone in the neighborhood. It's, these things work as an open microphone, and it has to be fairly sensitive, so they can hear you talk. You're walking down the street, they can hear you talking. Just like your phone, it's on listening for. Your phone is, you say it's listening for Hey Google or Hey Alexa or whatever thing. It's actually sitting there listening to everything you say, waiting to hear those words. And the shot spotter works on the same technology. It's the same thing. And we got open, and I can attest to this neighborhood. We have fireworks displays every night. And so there's no way this thing is picking up only gunshots. And we also have gunshots. We had, one just down the street from my house just last week. But this shot spotter is clearly, it's not a solution. It's a solution looking for a problem, not an actual solution to a problem. They're just spending money on the law enforcement industrial complex.
And I guess the contract's $30 million a year, or for 3 years. That's
I'd love to see the lobbyist money that goes into making this particular company and technology on the top shelf of police departments across the country.
Yeah. Well, police departments across the country have more pressure on more ways than one. Attorney General Merrick Garland is sicking the FBI on parents who are protesting on school board meetings, because they get loud and angry at these school boards who are doing things they don't want to do. And I always thought Americans protesting at school board meetings was the most basic way to interject with your democracy. But yet somehow you're now a domestic terrorist if you go in at the school board and shake your fist and yell. Where have we gone?
Right of assembly. I mean, this is First Amendment all over, right? The right of assembly, the right, peaceful assembly, and presumably, all we're hearing here are angry words, not assault on school board members, which would be obviously illegal and obviously handled by the local gendarmes. So you've got freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. You have. The only thing I can say is, thank God, Merrick Garland is not on the Supreme Court. What a menace he would be.
Well, he's a pretty good menace where he is, but he would be a greater menace. So, in some of the articles I read on it, they said that they're afraid and they want their members to be protected, and they need the FBI to declare police people who are loud and boisterous and making threats to be domestic terrorists. Well, making threats is assault, and that's already against the law. So there's already laws to protect people from being assaulted, from being threatened. So you don't need to add another one, because there's already a law there. And as Richard said, the local gendarmes will take care of it. So if someone actually takes that assault and ramps it up to battery, there are laws on the books against battery. And if somebody breaks into a meeting, there are laws against breaking and entering. So there are plenty of laws, way too many laws already on the books that handle all of this. And if you're going to use if you're going to paint people who are protesting at a meeting and using angry words as domestic terrorists, why was not every single BLM meeting, riot, whatever, painted with the same brush? This is
it's interesting. It's interesting that critical race theory is the thing that is actually being protested against.
Yeah,
we have
and these school board organizations all say that critical race theory is not being taught. But the reports I'm getting from parents around that I talk to around the country when I'm traveling, to a tourist spot, and people in Sacramento and coffee houses and all the rest of that tell me that critical race theory is being taught, and it is well within the rights of a parent to have input into what their children are being taught, especially when it's the kind of hokum that's critical race theory. Because critical race theory basically is flat out racism. It says that you are that your drives are based upon your race, your morals are based upon your race, your activities are based upon your race, and if that's not a flat-out definition of racism, then I don't know what it is.
Well, it's assigning guilt for everything that's wrong based on race, and that's problematic to say the least.
Yeah.
Well, and let's not forget that Newsom just signed a bill into law that says you now have to have ethnic studies courses to graduate high school. They've now politicized education. And so when you think about politicizing education, and then the AG calling people who protest at the school board meetings domestic terrorists, these things start to make more sense.
Yes, they do. And then I think that the thing you were talking about, I didn't read about that. I read that high school students have to take a morals class. They're required to study morality. And I'm sure that morality is going to be deeply couched in the horrors of capitalism, the wonders of socialism, and critical race theory. So I have a lot of concern about that as well.
Well, I have concerns about government teaching morals. That is an oxymoron if there ever was one.
Yeah, we sit here and we talk about the horrors of the American government, and then we're going to have that same government teach our children morals. What are we? This doesn't make any sense on any level, but yet that's what they're pushing, and it is
that Americans have such absolute faith in the truthfulness of their of the political and the executive and the judicial branch that I don't see why we're protesting. Oh wait, they don't have that, and that trust in those institutions as I'm segueing for you, James.
Yeah, go for it, John. Knock yourself out.
Okay. We're everybody. Not everybody. The polls by a wonderful polling organization, the best polling organization based upon their level of success in the world, which is Gallup. The only thing they don't do anymore is presidential polling. And I suspect I know the reason for that, but it sounds like conspiracy theory, so I won't. They were wrong in an election where they were sure they were right, and they stopped doing presidential polling. They say that the level of trust in the media is the lowest it's been since 2016. And we all know what was happening during 2016. It was a false conspiracy theory being touted by the media where other actual crimes were covered up by the media. But it's the American public's confidence in Congress is at the lowest point it's been at, I think, ever. What's kind of scary to me is its confidence in the executive branch is slightly higher than its confidence in Congress. I think that scares me a little bit. But the fact that the American public is losing confidence and trustworthiness of these bodies, the press, the Congress, President, and 13-point drop down to, I think, less than 50% of people actually believe in and have confidence in the judicial is a wonderful thing. It's a great thing. Because libertarians arrived there, 30 years ago. Don't trust any of them. Anybody, we know that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolute. So I think it's wonderful that the populace is waking up.
Well, I think we can take it a step further. We are living in purported democracy, and the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch all directly or indirectly get their power from the voters. And one of the other things that Gallup measures is the amount of trust in the voters that voters have, which is also at an all-time low. And why is that significant? Well, a democracy is simply rule by the majority, which puts minorities at risk potentially. The old saying is that a democracy is simply two wolves and a sheep voting on who's going to be lunch. And there's a lot of truth in that. And that's why we have not a pure democracy, but a Republican democracy, a democracy where there are safeguards built in, or supposedly safeguards built in, to make sure that the democracy, that the majority doesn't impinge upon the rights of minorities. That's what the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights to the Constitution, is all about, is making sure the majority doesn't overstep its bounds and do things to minorities. And of course, the smallest minority is a minority of one, making sure that us very small minorities are in fact protected from the ravages of majority votes. And those ravages are real. All you have to do is look at some of the well, we're looking at Weekend at Bernie's in the presidential suite right now. That was a majority vote. That's a problem.
I'm sorry, Richard, can you repeat that? I didn't hear that.
We're looking at a Weekend at Bernie's in the White House. That's a majority vote. That's scary.
Yeah.
Well, you really only need a plurality, right? You don't even need an actual technical majority. There's
that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm a little bit scared of that, because I'm very grateful that people are distrustful of government and its mouthpiece, the media that basically is controlling the world. But I'm a little concerned with people not trusting themselves. In essence, when they say voters, they're saying, I don't trust myself to make good decisions.
No, they're saying they don't trust other voters, but yeah.
Well, yeah, but they're not logical enough to realize they're saying they don't trust themselves. So that's the slippery slope to where we need somebody else to make those decisions for us, or I need to have somebody else make those decisions. So there's bad people who can't be trusted to vote properly don't make them, and that worries me.
Well, there's two directions you can go in that situation. You can say, I don't trust the voters, therefore I want to put in an oligarch or a tyrant or a benevolent dictator or whatever to make the correct decisions. Of course, it's going to be somebody that I approve of. Or you can say, government is making way too many decisions, and the voters are making way too many decisions on behalf of other voters. Let's scale back the decision-making areas for government, and of course that's the libertarian direction.
Well, no, I absolutely agree if that was the trend in this country. But and I'm hoping that that this lack of trust in institutions leads to where you're going. I'm a little worried that the intermediate step will be that benevolent dictator. But if we get to the point where more and more people, and I feel as if that's coming, that when I talk to people, even people in government, people who work for some of these regulatory agencies, students, people in general, especially business owners and all the rest of that, the idea that there are too many rules and regulations and that government has seized too much power is I think becoming more and more popular, and I'm hoping it doesn't take a dictatorship that we have to violently overthrow, because that's the only way to get rid of them to get us to where we need to be, which is way less government, way less taxes, way less.
Well, the difference between the American experiment was that we were supposed to be, as individuals, your individual rights were above the common good. That was the fundamental difference. And we have had a mindset has shifted now where we are supposed to subservient ourselves to the common good. And that's an actual danger. And, it pops up in this next question here. The geofence warrants, they had this secret geofence warrants around the Capitol is how they are catching some of these Capitol riot mobs. Now, we've discussed here, again, anybody who actually went into that Capitol with ill intent should be prosecuted. There's no question about it. But, some of these tools they are using, secretive tools, is how we end up with these abusive authoritarian governments. And the fact that we accept this when we didn't need it, we didn't really need this kind of thing. We have all the cameras and all the video, and quite frankly, if they'd had a half-competent response to the mob, we wouldn't have had this problem to begin with.
I agree. But I think I don't want to go off on a conspiracy rant, but yeah, I do, but I'm not going to. But that there were people there that could have kept the mob out of that building, and the decision was made not to put that barrier in place. And I have all sorts of theories about why, because it makes great theater when people are sitting in there. But the fact is that most of those people are guilty of unlawful entry. Unlawful entry. Apparently, unlawful entry into a federal building is a much greater crime than unlawful entry into my home. We're not guilty of breaking and entering. The people who broke to enter are guilty of breaking and entering, basically burglary if they went in and took stuff and left. But the rest of them are simply guilty of unlawful entry. And I challenge you to find middle-class people without criminal records doing any kind of time or having any serious criminal prosecution anywhere in the country over unlawful entry. It's like when the door of the warehouse is open, when you see somebody in there pilfering, don't walk in there and pilfer with them. If they're not supposed to be there, don't follow them in, and then you're let off with a warning. But because it's unlawful entry into the edifice of power, this overwhelming monopolistic power, somehow this has now become a major crime, and that's upsetting. I'm in no way making excuses for people stupid enough to do what they did. They're guilty of the highest order of lunacy, and there's going to be repercussions. But the idea that there's people who milled about, wandered in, and looked around, and then left are guilty of some heinous crime, I just don't agree with. But the idea that they're finding them by asking one of the technical overlords, Google, to use its ability to track people's location within a couple of meters anonymously, and then sifting through all the people that were in that approximate location to find those are guilty. That's a huge slippery slope, and it's something that shouldn't be allowed.
So, Richard?
I have nothing to add. I agree.
Oh. All right. Well, nothing to add. We'll move on. Big changes to California hair salons. They have now eased the training requirements for hairstylists. Well, apparently, they were too heavy, but we still need our protections, our overlord protectors from bad haircuts. I think I needed protection as a kid. My grandfather gave me my haircut, and it was I had no sideburns. It was just zip, zip, zip with an electric razor around my head, and that's the way I had. Well, you don't need a hair. Well, whatever. So there is something to be said for professionalism in haircutting, but the market will provide that very easily, and I'm glad to see that the Governor Newsom actually did the right thing by signing a bill that lessens regulation, but he doesn't eliminate regulation. The only reason those regulatory regulations are in effect, there's only one reason, and that's to protect the oligarchy, or to protect the people who are already haircutters or cosmetologists or what have you. They don't want competition, so they have enlisted, or did in the past, enlist the government to prevent newcomers from joining the trade, prevent competition. That's all it's about.
Absolutely, and when I saw that, they only need 1,600 hours of training, or they only need 1,000 hours of training, to cut hair and all the rest of that. Cosmetologists still need all that huge amount of training, but people who are hairstylists don't. And the quotes in a couple of articles about it were it's pretty much straightforward when you talk to people who represent these organizations supporting hairstylists and barbers and all the rest of that. That it's restrained trade. And the idea that it spills over. It's not only hair cutting. I mean, it's even worse in other areas. Pet peeve of mine, contractors. This is designed. The Contractor State License Board is designed to force people to hire a contractor to do something the contractor doesn't want to do, small jobs, or be a criminal by hiring someone to do it who's not licensed. And over and over and over again. What is it? What's the number? Something like 40% of jobs in America now require some kind of licensing you have to pass a test that's basically sanctioned by the government in order to perform your job, whereas 30 years ago it was 6%. I mean, this is insane. And I will guarantee you that people who get their hair cut now don't feel any safer about going into the place when they went into Bob Barber's shop on the corner 40 years ago. And they certainly don't feel any greater level of confidence in all of these professions that are closed shops, like attorneys and medicine and contractors and on and on. It's restraint of trade, and it's keeping prices unnaturally high. The barriers of entry into these trades huge, and this is affecting which demographic the most? People of color, poor people. They're the ones that can't afford to pay for that education to enter into this profession. And hair braiding, something that is popular in certain demographics, you can be arrested for braiding someone's hair without having gone through 1,600 hours of training for things that you're not even. All right,
and the worst part of that, John, was they didn't actually teach hair braiding in cosmetology school. So you'd have to go to the cosmetology school and in order to braid hair, and you were the only person in this cosmetology school who knew how to braid hair because you've been doing it since you were a kid.
Yeah.
And that's what these things had happened. And now they finally started teaching, hair braiding in cosmetology school, but not because anybody wanted it, but because they had to. And not because this whole thing is so infuriating because they actually make it harder for poor people to get on that bottom rung of the ladder. They make that bottom rung of the ladder higher and higher and higher, and then they say, hey, look at all the poor people, we need to help them. Well, you've made it impossible for them to climb on the economic ladder, and then you're going to sit here and say, we need help. You need to help them. Stop hurting them. How about we stop hurting people as a first before we start talking about the people that need the help?
Don't break people's legs and hand them a crutch and claim that you're the good guy.
Yeah. We got about a minute or so, Richard, so we're going to go this last one. The Biden administration's comptroller. You have a nice saying about him. Go ahead.
Comptroller of the currency, the person who is in charge of regulating the banking system. The nominee, I'm not sure if I am pronouncing the first name correctly, Sali Omarova. She's originally from Kazakhstan, went to university in Moscow on a scholarship back in the waning years of the USSR. In fact, the reason she got to the United States is because she was on an exchange program in 1988. And in 1989, the Soviet Union fell, so she ended up staying, much to the benefit probably of the Soviet Union or the former Soviet Union, and to the detriment of the United States, because now she is a Purdue law professor and wants to end banking so that people are forced to bank with the Federal Reserve, direct accounts with the Federal Reserve, as opposed to with the savings and loan with whoever you want to go bank with now. Now, I'm not a fan of the banking industry. Believe me, they have been coddled and protected and have a whole lot of things wrong with them. But it's a step above having only one bank, which is effectively what we'd have if everyone was forced to bank with the Fed.
And Richard, we got to go. We are out of time, Richard.
That's the end of it.
And we are out of, one bank, a government bank. I can't think of anything worse other than being out of time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching us. Thank you guys for being here. Please remember to love everybody. Good night.